Hey, everybody. Today, I wanted to spend a little time talking with you about this simple subject. I have hope. I was just talking with a guy the other day. There's a lot of places I just go and hang out to meet people. And the guy asked me once, he says, "Look, you seem to be, you have a lot of hope about the future, and you have a lot about hope about how things are going to be. Where'd you get all that?" And there was a lot more words than that, but that was basically the idea. And so as I was talking to the guy, I said, "Well, uh, yeah, I really do have a lot of hope. And if you knew what a train wreck I was, you'd really wonder why I have a lot of hope." And he says, "Well, you don't look much like a train wreck to me." So I invited him to call any of my friends, and they could give him a long list of the things about me that are just out of order. And after we got done laughing a bit, he just said, "No, I'd really like to know why you have some hope and or why you seem to have so much hope." And I said, "Well, here's the thing. I don't have a horribly negative view of myself, but the reality is there's a lot of things about me that on my worst day you wouldn't want to be around me. And I'm completely capable of causing people misery, being full of arrogance, being super prideful. Humility wouldn't even be a word you'd use to describe me. And uh, the thing that's important to me for you to understand is that uh, when I start making a list of all those things, it's pretty easy for me to go, man. Uh, I really need some help. Well, the truth is I do need help. And so I got to think about this issue of hope and why do I have hope? And you can look at this through a lot of different ways. But today, just really briefly, I want to talk to you about why I have hope because of Jesus. Now, I realize that I could spend a lot of time talking about what Jesus did for us on the cross and that he died for our sins and that he made it possible for us to have a relationship with him because of that. But today I want to talk about why I have hope because of Jesus, because of what he provides for me now. And in Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 to 46, and also in Luke chapter 22, 39 to 46, there's a story. It's one of the more famous stories about Jesus. If you're a Christ follower, you've heard this story before. If you are sort of new to Jesus and you're wondering, listen, do I want to have any part of this guy at all? Is he worth following? Is he worth listening to his teaching? Well, here's a snapshot in time about Jesus. And for me, it really gives me hope, and you'll see why in just a minute. But just so you know, again, if you're new to the scriptures, the Bible, if you're new to Jesus, there's a lot of stories written about Jesus in the first four books of what's called the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And a lot of times in those gospel records, they tell the same stories from a different lens, each person from a different lens, and certainly the stories are consistent with each other, but you get a whole picture of it. Now, today I'm not going to go to those passages and actually specifically read all of that. So I want to tell you the story and then talk to you a little bit about the reason I have hope for myself and frankly for other people too. Um, uh, I run into a lot of believers who are just completely defeated, and they're frustrated with the fact that they're struggling so much. I also run into I have a lot of friends who are not Christ followers, and a lot of them are really getting overwhelmed, especially with the culture and what's going on today, and everything from politics to world events and so on. And so I'm not here to discuss politics or all the things that overwhelm us, but I do want to talk to you about how I can have hope in the middle of that and why specifically I have hope that even with the things that are out of order in me that don't go right, um, I have hope. So here's this story about this guy named Jesus, and please understand that this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the most amazing stories about Jesus. It was right before he was crucified. For those of you who are believers, you'll quickly notice when you look at those scriptures, this is the story of Jesus in a place called the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane was a garden that Jesus went to pray. And here's the context of things. A lot of things had been heating up in his life. He had been teaching about love and about being genuine in your walk with God and honoring God with your life, and going above and beyond to live the life of God in front of other people. And the religious leaders of the time who had power didn't like it, because the guy was so genuine and what he had to say was so compelling that they were actually losing their power, their control over him. So there's lots of reasons why Jesus ended up being crucified, but one of them is that the people who were the leaders of the religious sect that were upset with Jesus, and that would have been the Jewish people at that particular time, were very angry with him, and they were in the process of trying to get him killed because of the fact that he was gaining such a following, and because he'd called them out on the inconsistency of their own life. And so Jesus comes along, and he knows, here's the context of what's happening. So he knows he's about to be killed. He's going to first be turned over to the authorities, the Roman authorities, because the religious leaders have now tricked the authorities into arresting Jesus, saying that he was an enemy of the state, basically. And so Jesus knew that was happening, and he knew it was going to be a hard thing. And he also knew that his Father in heaven, God, had asked him to lay down his life for the sins of every single person in the world, so that they would not only be forgiven, but so that something else could happen, so that they actually could have the ability to not do things that were wrong. They would have the ability to overcome when they were overwhelmed. And so again, just remember, Jesus is about to be turned over to the authorities, and he takes his three favorite friends and disciples, Peter, James, and John, with him to this garden. And they go into the garden, and Jesus stops under a tree, and he says to those three guys, these were his primary leaders of his 12 disciples, his 12 apostles. And he asked them, would you stay here and pray and watch with me? And so Jesus leaves them, and pretty quickly they fall asleep. Now, Jesus didn't know that at first, but pretty quickly they fall asleep. Jesus goes, and he begins to talk to his Father. And he says a lot of things, I'm sure, but the part that's recorded for us, he says, Father, and I'm just paraphrasing here, if there's any way this cup can pass from me, and he was referencing the fact that he knew that he was going to have to die on the cross, that he would be shamed, and that the weight of all the wrongdoing in all the world would fall on him. But he would be the sacrifice for sin, the perfect sacrifice for sin. And he knew that God had asked him to do that. And so he went, and you need to remember something. Jesus Christ was a fully human person, and he was fully God. I'm going to repeat that. Jesus was fully human. He was born of a woman, but he was fully God. And so think of it like this. We all have a body. We all have a soul. That's our ability, our mind, will, and our emotions, our ability to, often people reference it as their personality, but all that goes into making us up, people knowing who we are and the uniqueness that we have. And then we have a spirit within. Jesus had the body of a man, the soul of a man, the ability to think, feel, and decide, and he had the Spirit of God in him. He was Christ, the Messiah. And so here's Christ the Messiah talking to his Father, and he says, Father, being this cup that you've asked me, this cup of agony, of pain, of being separated from you, of taking on the sin of the world, the punishment, all of that is just too much. If there's any way that this can pass from me, please do it. And then I would like to suggest that you see is that we see the humanity of man and the deity of God in one place at one time. And honestly, we're seeing the biggest part of Jesus' humanity when he was struggling with the weight of what was going on. And he prayed and he prayed, and it says that he was agonizing so much he sweat like drops of blood. Some people say he actually did. He was having so much stress and agony that he broke the capillaries in his body and his face. But in any case, he prayed and said, Lord, could you let this cup pass from me? Then he goes back to his friends who were supposed to be watching and praying with him, and he got back and they had fallen asleep. Now, understand, it's pretty overwhelming to know that you're going to die, but it's a whole lot more overwhelming to know that you're going to take the sin of the world on you and that you're going to stand in the place in the sacrifice and you did nothing to deserve it. You're the Son of God. You're the sinless Son of God. And he goes back and he's looking for support from his friends, and his friends were asleep. And he wakes them up and he says, guys, couldn't you just stay awake 1 hour while I went and pray? And so he said, please pray. And he goes back again a second time. And he prays the same thing. Lord, if this cup can pass from me, he certainly is saying, your Lord, your will be done. But is there any way this cup can pass for me? And what from me? And I want you to get, and I'm repeating it more than once, I want you to get that we see the humanity of Jesus fully in place here. Now, the reason that's so important is because of this. You may not have having to give you may yet have had to give your life for somebody else, but the truth is every person that's listened to me has been overwhelmed before, and it very well may be that you've been overwhelmed with a lot of things. And so as you're thinking about that and you're listening to this story about Jesus Christ in his humanity, I want you to recognize nothing's hidden here. He is so overwhelmed with the possibility of dying, with being separated from his Father because he would become sin so we didn't have to pay for our sin. And so Jesus Christ is agonizing over that, and he goes to get help from his friends, and they aren't there to support him, and he goes back to pray again, and he's praying the same thing over again to the Father, pouring his heart out to him. And certainly you can see it wasn't this nice, easy going, well, God, if you could help me out, that would be great. Literally, he was struggling with the enormous, overwhelming things that were happening to him. And so hear this now. He goes back a third time. He goes back to his disciples, the 3 friends he had. And again, they're asleep. Again, he asks, could you not wait with me? Could you not pray for me? He goes back one more time. And this time a remarkable thing happens. And this is where the hope comes. The same Jesus who was God and man at the same time, who was praying that his Father would let him out of, and it's the reason Jesus came to the world was to die. And he knew that. The men didn't know that exactly that what was coming. They didn't understand all of that yet. But here's Jesus. He's literally been sort of betrayed by his best friends, or at least let down. And he goes back a third time and he spends agonizing time praying to the Lord. And all of a sudden you see a change in his prayer. And when I say prayer, I just mean he's talking to God. He's talking to God, and now all of a sudden something happens. He says, as he'd pray before, Lord, let this cup pass from me. But then his language changes, and he says, Lord, since I now know that this cup can't pass from me, your will be done. Now I want you to get this. The first time, he's agonizing. He's in great distress. He goes and talks to the Lord. His friends are not around to help him out. And he's still agonizing. He comes back. He goes again. He's agonizing. He goes back. His friends are not around to help him out. He goes back again. And as he has spent time with his Father, all of a sudden, it's like he has an aha moment. He gets the answer that certainly he was praying that he would not have, but in his time with the Lord, something changed. I'm going to tell you what happened. It did not change that Jesus was going to have to go to the cross. And it did not change that he would have to be separated from his Father. And it did not change that he would be carry the weight of the world. It did not change that he would be shamed in front of the world and the leaders of that time and so on. What changed is, from his time with the Father, the Lord, as he spent time with the Father gave him precisely what he needed to deal with the overwhelming weight of everything that was coming to him. Now, here's an interesting thing. Long before this, or quite a little bit of time before this, Jesus was talking with his disciples one day, and he made a very interesting statement about himself. Now, remember, this is a man who has the body of a man, the soul of a man, mind, will, and emotion, and he has the spirit of God, of Christ in him. And he was talking to the disciples, and he made this statement to them. This is in John chapter 9, John chapter 5. The Son of Man, apart from the Father, can't even do one single thing. He goes on to say in another place that everything I say, the Father teaches me. Everything I do, the Father gives me to do and gives me the ability to do. You see, Jesus was, when he came to this world, according to the book of Philippians in chapter 2, Jesus Christ emptied himself of all power and authority. Even though he was Christ and he was deity, when he had the body of a man, the soul of a man, and the Spirit of God in him, while he never stopped being the Son of God, according to him, all that he did when he was on this planet, he did by the power of God and the power of his Father that he received from him again and again and again and again. You say, well, Tim, why are you going on about this? Well, here's why. And I'll land the plane about why I have hope. Because Jesus Christ, in the middle of when he was overwhelmed and when he had no one around him to support him, and literally the weight of the world was on him, the thing that shifted him from, I want out, his humanness, to let's go do this, your will be done, God. The thing that shifted him is that he spent time with his Father. And it wasn't just this easy conversation that was kind and sweet. He was agonizing to the point where he was sweating drops of blood. And what we see is the living God of the universe worked in a human being in the body of a man, the soul of a man, but with the Spirit of God in him, who was dependent on him. And when he could not go any further, when he was completely overwhelmed with what needed to happen, the Father did for him what needed to be done. And the third time, when he back to his men, he found them asleep again. Again, while they loved him, they were not there to support him. He said, get up. Basically, it's time for me to be betrayed. And he took those men with him from there to the place where he was betrayed by one of his own men, Judas, and taken into custody and finally led off to the cross. Here's the reason why I have hope. I know about how messed up I am. I don't know about you, and maybe you are or are not more messed up than I am, but I know about how messed up I am. I have a body of a man. I have the soul of a man. And because Jesus Christ died on the cross and came back from the dead, he made a promise that if you'll accept me, if you'll just say it, Jesus, I want you, that if you'll accept him, he comes and lives in your spirit. And now his spirit that lives in you has the ability to do all that God did for him when he was on this planet. The same Jesus, the same spirit that lived inside this man we refer to in history as Jesus Christ lives in you if you follow Jesus. If you're a person that has never ever made a specific decision to follow Christ, and when you want to know how, contact us at Abiding Life Ministries. But I want you to hear something. I talk to people all the time saying, hey, I don't need any of that religion stuff. And I definitely don't need Jesus. And, I do pretty fine. I do very well all by myself. I'm an educated man or a woman. Listen, I love a challenge and I can take care of everything. Well, that's all fine. Talk to me after all that is overwhelming in this world starts to squeeze you, and you start experiencing the failure that finally comes to every person. Listen, I want you to do well. I want you to, we all have dreams, and I would love for you to have those dreams, but there's something I want you to have more. I want you to have hope. There's this guy named Jesus who lives inside me, and I have no bragging rights. I have nothing to point to say what an incredible guy I am. But I can tell you that this Jesus that lives inside me has done remarkable things to transform me into a guy that is actually not a bad guy to be around. A guy who loves people who are unkind to him. A guy that spends a lot of time investing in the lives of people, not because there's a payoff, but because Jesus said to, and as a result, it brings about life into other people. I've become a better man because of Jesus Christ and his work in me as I've turned to him. So if you're like me and you've had times in your life when you've been completely overwhelmed, when you have felt hopeless, and all the things in life are just about to cover you over, I want you to remember that Jesus Christ gives hope. Not because it's some warm and fuzzy thing and we can say hope and I'll cry a little tear and say it's all nice, because he actually delivers hope. His life in me knows all the things to say to my mind, will, and emotions. And his Father in heaven that taught him can tell me everything I need and do everything that's necessary to bring me to a place of hope and to overcome when I'm completely overwhelmed with what happens in this world. Hey, listen, I want to give you a little teaser. The next time we get together, we're going to talk about something totally different. It's called plans. You can call it the man with the plan. But I want to talk to you about what did the scriptures say about planning, and what happens when the whole thing blows up. I mean, I've got plenty of my friends say, listen, I don't want to make a plan because every time I make a plan, the thing doesn't happen. And I want to talk to you about how Christ is in all that and what he does in the middle of planning. And there's some surprising things that happen. So the next time I see you, we'll be talking about planning. Thanks for joining us.